The Liberating Arts seeks to articulate the enduring relevance of a liberal arts education during a time of pandemic and protest. Through our online platform, we will host a series of conversations with writers, academics, institutional leaders, and public intellectuals about the nature of the liberal arts, their formational purpose, and their moral significance in a time of great cultural disruption. We hope to inspire viewers and listeners to learn more about the liberating effects of these arts on their own lives. To find out more, please visit www.deliberatingarts.org or find us on Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, or YouTube.
Welcome to the Liberating Arts. Today, instead of having a conversation with just one person, I have invited three presidents of fairly new colleges. And in this time of pandemic and protest, the liberal arts, of course, are at least under siege, under question. And how are we going to continue them in different forms with new and innovative ways of promoting the flourishing of the liberal arts? I think that these three presidents are going to give us plenty of ideas. So let me introduce the three that have joined me, and hopefully you'll get to hear a lot about their stories and their new ventures. We have with us John Mark Reynolds, who is the president of the Constantine College, St. Constantine College. And he was also the founder of the Torrey Honors Program at Biola University and former provost at Houston Baptist University. We also have Matthew Smith, who is a scholar of Renaissance literature at Azusa Pacific University and the founding president of Hildegard College. And last but not least, we have President Blackwood, who is the founding president of Ralston College, as well as the host of the Ralston College podcast and a Boethius scholar. So thank you guys for joining us today. I want to start by hearing about your schools and really getting a sense of the colleges themselves. So we'll kind of just maybe take some turns getting to hear about your college. I know that most of our listeners are great at Google, and so they'll be able to find the webpage and get to see some of your vision statements. But if you could really give us the story about what gap did you see out there in the market that you felt like you've all been part of colleges, you've all founded things within colleges, you've worked within colleges. Why start a new school, and how does your college kind of fill that gap that you saw? So if we could start with John Mark, do you mind starting us off?
No, I'm glad to do it. The idea here is so many colleges decided to become universities and added what we should be candid are second, third tier grad programs as they grew into universities. What if we went the other way and a liberal arts college merged with a K through 12 and so founded a K through 16 and then grew that way? The advantage of that is a relatively small college like St. Constantine. We have 60 people that we can utilize who are full-time employees roughly of the college who can work inside the college and who are expected to be able to teach everyone from the nursery all the way up through the college program, because we divide into sessions. As a great book style, as so many of us are, micro college, we're able to offer some of the advantages of what would be a pretty big Christian liberal arts college, especially as the K through 12 grows, with the advantages of a micro college. And we're able to do the one-on-one Oxford tutorials that I wanted to do when I started the Torrey Honors Program at Biola, first employee sitting with a yellow legal pad, but it just wasn't affordable. Biola was awesome, and Biola continues to be awesome running Torrey and the wonderful job that Paul Spears has done there. But the economy, just won't allow for the kind of one-on-one tutorials that we can offer as a result of integration with K through 12. So we're the weird thing. I think we're the only one of our kind that's K through 16. We're not a college that has a high school or a K through 12 like a Hillsdale. We're fully integrated. So there'll be a session that, my Arabic speaking Balamand graduate from Lebanon person in the nursery will do with my college students. And that's true of every level of the school.
Wow, that's so fantastic. I mean, as someone who works in the K through 12 sector, as well as I work in college and in grad school, I'm always wanting that kind of lifelong learning vision. So
it also breaks down the snobbery. There's some kind of weird thing where when I worked at a university as a chief academic officer, you were able to keep a Latin teacher for less money than maybe the school down the road that was a K through 12, because you had the prestige of being a college. And that's ridiculous. The ridiculous notion that teaching second graders is somehow less academically robust than teaching, college sophomores. So by bringing the two things together and having SHEEP, which is the other kind of college distinctive, we're able, only urban campus in the United States where college students can list shepherd as like their career goal.
I did not know that part. That's actually really new to me.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, SHEEP, it's cool. And we're very urban. We're in the most diverse city in the US. We have a very diverse student body, and SHEEP.
Yeah, I did not know the SHEEP part. That's really cool. Yeah, I taught fourth grade. That was my first teaching job. And I always told people in college, I learned everything I needed to know about being a professor from teaching fourth grade. I mean, you're really in.
I'll walk out of a really robust Plato seminar and somebody will hit me in the head with a ball, like a kickball. And that's great. That's
that's a good mix.
Yeah.
Stephen, why don't you tell us the story of Ralston College? What gap were you hoping to fill?
Well, I guess I'd approach that question in two different ways, both in the kind of macro and the micro. Just speaking very broadly, I've come to think that it's pretty clear that our civilization at large lacks its fundamental mechanisms of transmission. If you saw that the house you were living in had foundations that were about to collapse, that's you'd say, well, there's a kind of urgent existential necessity to do something about that, and that is certainly our view of the West at large, or our civilization at large. Let's say, I think it's true not only of the West, by the way. And so, on the one hand, we think there's a vibrant necessity, but also an opportunity to play some role in building and rebuilding at the big level, and we certainly think that higher education, the humanities, the liberal arts, they are and always have been fundamental as the source or stream, the source of the, let's say, the human dimension of our lives, or frankly, civilization is a human dimension. So it's the fundamental, the foundations, the fundaments of the whole prospect of human flourishing. That on the one hand, and then you say, well, okay, that's kind of a big picture, systemic account. How do you do that? And the truth is, I think the answer to that is very small in a way, and that is that there is no such thing as, in a way, humanity. They're only human beings, and if you want to transmit a culture or a civilization, there's really only one way to do that, and that is by lighting the candles in the young, so they can then transmit those fires to the next generation. And so at the micro level, I think all of these things, whether we're talking about the economy or politics or arts or culture or any of our institutions, even family life, they aren't ends in themselves. I mean, they exist for the realization of the individuals that they have the infinite privilege of having within them. And so at the micro level, the opportunity we see is that there are not just a few, but millions of people facing, let's call it the meaning crisis or the alienation of modern life. And they're finding themselves without the most basic tools to confront those in the way that human beings need to, whether it's questions of mortality and suffering, or truth and beauty, or nobility. And so I guess what I would really say is, I think the opportunity for all of us, and in fact the urgent necessity at our time in our civilization, is to bring those two things together. That is to feed the longings and the perennial desires for self-understanding and depth and truth in the human being that exist intrinsically, and by that to hope that the treasures of our own past and civilization, the ways that opens up the horizon for human flourishing for others, can be transmitted to the next generation. And in some small way or big way, whatever is in an unknown future, we hope to participate in that.
And so will Ralston College be doing more of the one-on-one type seminars that John Mark was talking about? You're going to have a lot more focus on the smaller, relationship, the conversations that you're having. What is your hope for what life would look like at Ralston College?
It's a great question. We see fundamentally ourselves have a double vocation, both on the one hand to be part of a reinvention and revival of the traditional academy, in-person degrees, and long format forms of learning. On the one hand, and on the other hand, to be part of a wider effort to democratize the humanities for anyone, anywhere. Why should you have to be getting a degree or even enrolled in a degree program at a college to spend a weekend or a week in person or time online, encountering the fundamental questions? So we see a lot of different possibilities there, but certainly in terms of the degree programs that we expect to offer, yes, I think the university has got to be defined in its in-person activities by relatively small in-person exchanges, or there's no justification for them at all. I mean, I don't think anyone would seriously say that you're better off in an in-person class of 500 than you are in a Zoom class of 12 after the experience of the last year, all other things being equal. So yes, lots of in-person, in-class and out of class conversation.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. So Matthew Smith, you want to add to the conversation? Tell us where Hildegard fits in this vision.
Hildegard College, which I should note, is not offering classes yet. We're launching fall 2022. So we are currently soliciting applications from students and are excited about launching next year. And we started a few years ago, really when I caught wind of something happening in the country that I call the alternative college movement. And it isn't always new. Some of these are more than 100 years old. And it's especially prevalent, I think, among Christian colleges, but not exclusively Christian colleges. And so I took some time and visited several of these schools, or met online with their founders and presidents and got to know them. One of them being St. Constantine College by John Mark here, and learned a few things about them. I learned that they are graduating exceptionally competent, learned, literate, virtuous people. And they're doing so at a fraction of the price. A lot of these programs cost less for the entire degree than 1 year at a conventional big university. Another thing I learned is that they're small. The term micro college is kind of thrown around. A lot of them are fewer than 100 students on purpose because they think there's something important about that. A lot of them I think, have a renewed sense of mission, largely because of their size and the control they have over the curriculum. And then lastly, and this surprised me, many of them offer one degree, if not one degree, a small handful of degrees. And I think that's closely related to the kind of economic responsibility that they can practice and the sort of debt-free policy many of them offer their students. So finding out about these schools, learning about how they started, the thing that struck me most was people don't know about them. There's not much brand recognition for them. And I'm here in Southern California, and there are really no colleges like this in Southern California. My passion and the passion of the other founders of Hildegard College is for the great books, great texts and art, intellectual history, as well as for the sciences and mathematics and a sort of concentration in entrepreneurial thought. And nothing like that existed. And what we discovered as we started to sort of build out the model was that we can do this, we can offer this one degree, and we could do it at honestly a fraction of the cost. We can make a 10-to-1 student to faculty ratio available to almost any student who's willing to just, work during the summer and save a bit and pay their tuition throughout the year. So that's the sort of cultural reason why we started. There are other reasons, more kind of ideal reasons about our experience, the founders' experience with the big university, big higher ed, as I call it, just sort of losing its soul, by which I mean not believing that these schools often don't believe, at least say they don't believe, that there's any connection between the order of the education and an implied purpose to education. And we begin our discussions at Hildegard College with a belief in a purpose of education. And so therefore we try to seek and discover what the order or structure of it ought to be. Teaching at university level for about a decade now, I've been surprised but a bit dismayed by the fact that if you ask most professors at any big university, are you teaching the exact content that you want to teach in the way that you want to teach it, class size, mode of delivery, and within the broader curricular program that you think it best fits? The answer is almost univocally going to be no, no, no. And I think that you can do it. You can do it by following an alternative model, by kind of disrupting the way that higher education works. And now is the moment. I think that accrediting agencies are beginning to encourage innovation. The brand recognition is growing. There are more and more of these schools. So we're sort of seeing that trend, seeing an opportunity for people in and around Southern California. And that's how Hildegard College was birthed.
Yeah, so I'm incredibly biased. I mean, one of the reasons that I brought all three of you together is that I would love to overhaul the whole system, because there ends up being this dichotomy, and I see it all the time. I promote great books on Twitter, and without fail, people write, you're one of those people that wants everyone to get $100,000 in debt so that they can work at Starbucks because they got a philosophy degree. There's no paradigm in which you could study the good and true and beautiful things and have a job and not have debt and be a balanced person. It's either elitist or it's costly, and I think that's because the universities are so filled with bloat, right? They're just, the way they even brand themselves, we're going to offer 100 majors. Look at all these choices you have. And you can do anything you want during the 4 years that you're here. And we promote extracurricular, and we have student counseling, and we have, there's a lot of bloat to it. So what you guys are doing, I'm really biased towards. John Mark.
Well,
yeah.
to the contrary, the entire purpose of what we're doing, and we're hoping to have branch campuses not in Los Angeles, but in California, and inside of Pennsylvania, and inside of Dallas, actually, inside of Texas, within the next couple of years, minimally. That's who we're talking to right now. And the goal is to provide a fully accredited baccalaureate degree for less than or around $10,000 a year. So that the entire cost of a degree can be less than most private Christian colleges. And this can be done because not a single employee K through 16 at St. Constantine doesn't teach. We have no full-time administrators, and that includes me. So I teach what would be considered a half-time load inside the college in my area of specialty, Plato in particular, and we need to eliminate administrators. So I'm at war with the entire concept of administrators. I'm at war with presidential salaries. People need to get the 990 of the school that they're considering. So just type in X university, 990, find out what the president makes, and then figure out how many professors I could hire for the president's salary. And the answer is often 10 or 11 professors, not counting the benefits packages. So, this can be done. It is being done. It will be done. And a lot of it is by eliminating the bloat of administration, none of which students see. Let me point out that most of the people we're talking about eliminating from a college or university experience aren't people that students ever interact with. They're that giant building that exists on every campus, multi-stories, of people that no student ever runs into, because it's the administrative assistant to the administrative assistant to the vice president for the associate provost for innovation, or the committee to eliminate committees. And so if this is all eliminated ex nihilo, we can change the world, and we can eliminate debt I live in an area, we placed our school intentionally in an area where in a 5-mile radius, the average household income is $22,000 a year.
Oh my.
And so we're providing college for everyone else, and college for everyone else that's one-on-one Oxford style tutorials, not the McCollege they invented after World War II, when Reynoldses had the temerity in West Virginia to decide they wanted to go to college. So this can be done. And I really commend these folks for doing this. The wonderful thing about this is we're a giant global happening. And so we're talking to schools in England, we're talking to places in Lebanon about doing this. And one advantage St. Constantine has is we're connected, we're pan-Orthodox. And so we're connected to the entire Orthodox world globally. And this can really revolutionize the world, far from being snobbery. Many of the faculty that say, oh, we're worried about snobbery, we're worried about the cost of education, work in institutions that only upper middle class or wealthy people can afford, and or they're saddled with $100,000 in debt when they get out, or $40,000 in debt. Our students have no debt when they graduate, and I'm sure that that's true of these other two places. So the micro college movement, there's room for many more people, and many more people should get in. It isn't, oh, we have to do the St. Constantine thing or this thing. Everywhere I go, I encourage everyone to do this, because the great research universities aren't going anywhere. At the graduate level, they provide a real value. Graduate education, we could get into the politics of it, but in the sciences and other areas, it's not broken. Generally, it's pretty healthy. The US is still the envy of the world. But this kind of factory farming university college education, where bluntly at a lot of the prestige schools, if they got rid of their undergraduate programs, they wouldn't even notice. They don't care. And everything, all the prestige is in the MA, PhD type programs. So let us do, particularly in a K through 16 integration, let us do what really, some of the bigger schools in Texas or other places don't want to do. They don't care at this point. And so I think there's a movement here, and the people that you have, I really appreciate the opportunity. We represent, and it's not either or, pick this, or this is good or this is bad. This is an opportunity for many ideas to flower. And my guess is almost all of them will work in their niche, because again, I don't require 6,000 students to pay for my giant campus and climbing wall and my 15 vice presidents. Here's a rule of an unhealthy university. If there are more vice presidents than exist in any major in terms of faculty, that school is, I think, a fraud. Because they are prioritizing vice presidential salaries, which are almost always higher than faculty salaries, over a thing that they claim is a major. And that's not a hard thing for parents to check. Look it up. How many vice presidents are on the university website? And then look at the major your student is going to, and count the full-time, not part-time, full-time professors there. And if it's just horrible, the situation that we've come to.
I believe that you're exactly right, that there are people who want this kind of education. They're not elitist. They want to really teach students. My problem is, over the last several years, I haven't been able to see graduate programs. So one of the things you said was, the graduate programs are fine at these research institutions. I haven't been able to find graduate programs that I would trust to send my students to, who I think were doing real education. So my question that I want to direct at Stephen was, where are we going to get these professors who are going to be able to hand down the tradition when in the PhD level, they're not being trained in our tradition?
I love that question. I've been scavenging off of 20 years of teaching gifted and talented people like Matthew. And so I'll be curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, because I think it's, yes, Stephen, please just elaborate on that for us.
Well, I'd say a few things. The first is that I would in some respect, respectfully disagree with John Mark's analysis. I'm very doubtful about the health of the whole system. I'm not a catastrophist. We all know there's lots of great people teaching at virtually any institution. Some sincere, thoughtful administrators. People trying to. But all that said, there's a deep loss, forgetfulness of mission, and even sometimes profound betrayal of mission that is systemic now. And though I know there's lots of Chinese money, eager to find a place at a small number of elite institutions in this country, I actually don't believe we're the envy of the world. I think the notion that there is any university in the United States that broadly speaking could be compared to, say, the University of Cambridge is absurd. I mean, I think it's a much better university by many different metrics. That's not to say there may not be programs that are comparable, but I think the top research universities are also facing some very big problems. And at the level of humanistic education, the PhDs, that's certainly one of the places that happens. I mean, you've got in the humanities a huge problem of presentism. That's to say, you can go into many institutes or departments and no one's working on anything, before the 19th century or maybe the late 18th. And often it's all 20th century. So there's a real problem there. You've also got, of course, the kind of reproduction of fairly boring, ideological standpoints that are being perpetrated through or disseminated through the education of people in those doctoral programs and in the and therefore in them and with them as they go on throughout their careers. But I do want to say at the same time that it is such, I mean, this is maybe the wrong way to put this a little bit because I don't like resorting to economic metaphors, but for just to make the point very clearly, it is a buyer's market right now. I mean, the notion that there are no great people out there to hire with PhDs is just wrong. I mean, there are astoundingly talented people. And frankly, some of the best people are the ones not getting jobs because of some of the prejudices and biases within the hiring committees of the institutions that have jobs to offer. And so, one of my fundamental predictions is that new beginnings, new colleges, new high schools, new whatever, are going to find themselves with, with possibly the best crop of people to hire in history, but certainly an enormously large group of talented people who've been who are ready to really carry on the work of thinking, reading, writing, and of course teaching. But that's not to say that we don't have very serious systemic problems. I've started by saying that I think that we have the very foundations are seriously undermined, and that we whether there'll be anything that resembles what has historically been known to be Western culture is, in my view, a very open question. I think it's already, we're in a position that's very discontinuous with when you have things like freedom of speech being suggested to be kind of threats to minorities rather than the very mode of their securing their rights against a majority. I mean, you have very serious undermining of fundamental, at least political conditions of our life together. So I think there's big questions about transmission, but I'm not despairing about whether there are young people who can be hired into roles in the programs that we are offering.
Yeah, let me say, my problem is I can't list jobs. At this point, I probably hire 6 or 7 people with applicable degrees a year. I can't list jobs because I already just over the transom get more applications than I know what to do with from first-rate colleges and universities. So I agree with that truth. I will say it's rare for me to be the least apocalyptic person on any podcast. But I will defend American universities, and people can take a look at global rankings of American universities. I still think, particularly in the hard sciences and some of the professional degrees, that the US is the envy of the world. I think if we're talking about the humanities, and the micro colleges often emphasize the humanities, is the thing I like about Matthew's work, because it deals with entrepreneurial activities as well. One idea we have with St. Constantine is each micro college we establish will take an emphasis that's good for the area. And so, a school in Houston might emphasize something that's excellent for Houston. A school in California, might find something that is good for what's on the ground there. But all kidding aside, I obviously generally agree that the American college and then humanities universities have their troubles. Though I will say you can still be a traditionalist, and I had a mentor, Sheldon Van Auken, who told me in grad school, keep your mouth shut, keep your powder dry, and give them both barrels as you go out the door. I suppose gun metaphors are bad nowadays, but it was generally good advice. And I've generally found that I can hire people from very good schools. I think Baylor is an excellent example of what has become, they have one of the best placement rates, for example, in philosophy in the world, because traditional colleges who are looking for analytically trained philosophers who are, not captured by the trends of the moment are coming out of a place like Baylor, coming out of a place like UD, University of Dallas. Notre Dame is still capable of producing a world-class PhD in some of these areas, though again, even our Catholic universities are becoming infected by particular problems. So I don't want to downgrade what you're saying. It's certainly the case that graduate education is fraught with peril. But I do think micro colleges, we don't need, thousands of employees. I need to find 5 or 6 good PhDs a year. And if I can find 5 or 6 good PhDs a year, I'm okay. And the US, and yes, you're right, Great Britain, Australia, some excellent universities there. Though I'll tell you, don't try to open a K through 16 in Australia. They have made private education extraordinarily difficult. We had a group of people interested in a St. Constantine program. Forget the college part of it, just teaching children outside of the state system or outside of the state curriculum is very difficult. So we often find that traditionally Orthodox countries like Georgia, Russia, Romania, there are Lebanon, we have greater opportunities to reach out. So I want to agree with you. The United States has some perilous problems.
Yeah, especially what I've seen in the graduate world more and more. Those are actually the 3 universities I would have listed. Is Baylor, Notre Dame, University of Dallas, and then St. Andrews.
If I could just very quickly say, of course, I think there's much that is sound in the hard sciences, especially, but this does come to something that both Matthew and John Mark have been speaking about that I think is really fundamental. The character of the life or the atmosphere, the character of college life, the character of your social life at a university is also very influential and formidable. And a lot of the problems, let's say particularly ideologically, that young people are coming out with, it's not all coming from the classroom. It's coming from residence life or residence life is above all a huge problem, but with the larger atmosphere within a campus culture is extremely influential, and one can't expect to go through any of the major universities without suffering some pretty collateral damage at that level.
Yeah, well, actually, Matthew, do you want to speak to that? Because you have a different model for what residence life would look like at Hildegard, right? Do you mind talking about what you imagine life would look like for those who are going to apply and become students?
Yeah, so we don't have residential housing for students to live in. And it's partly to keep costs down for students, but not entirely for that reason. Similar to our approach to the liberal arts, where we, instead of saying, here's a liberal arts degree, now graduate and go do something with it, we pull that go do something with it charge into the education and try to coach students in how to do that while they're students. Similarly, we ask students to live in the real world and live out their lives of virtue and in discipleship and formation with each other, simply in apartments in the community. So we ask them to live in the community. We did not invent this. I think that there are several micro colleges that do this in the country. And from what I can tell, they don't suffer at all for student, a sense of student community. Rather, what contributes to a healthy student community more than anything I've found is when all of the students are taking all of the same classes with the same professors, with their peers, sharing the same learning goals and learning experiences. I think that's really irreplaceable for what universities call the student experience or the learning experience, which I'm still yet to differentiate how, what that means as compared to just education itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we don't, I agree with what Stephen's saying about the problems with residential life and how that becomes a distraction. I think of it as a kind of a fictional Disneyland on college campuses that doesn't contribute much, especially at schools where almost all students live within commuting distance anyway. Nonetheless, they pay a premium to live on campus for that experience. And I think you can do it better just by having students live in community with one another.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say, because we're in an urban environment and we want to be in an urban environment, we do offer some limited housing. What we don't offer is the very thing that's being described here. I went back and said, everyone teaches. So, we don't have a giant res life entertainment program we live in Houston. If you can't be entertained in the city of Houston, you have a real problem. And so we do have dorm space, kind of subsidized housing available, because some of our people come from backgrounds, first generation college students, that would find it hard to find housing in a neighborhood like ours that was safe and good and affordable. But then, lots of our students, you're junior or senior, go get an apartment. Why in the world would you want to live inside of college housing? So I think again, there are going to be many models for this, but what you can see that smaller colleges are getting away from, or smaller programs, are giant bureaucracies where a lot of the rot that parents worry about really exists there. Your calculus teacher or your math teacher or your science teacher, it probably doesn't have time to do ideological indoctrination. They're dealing with subject area. That's even true in, a hard lit class often. But there are hundreds of people in some places hired, and this is true at Christian colleges, whole departments that are hired with an ideological spin, often to buy off the local paper so that the local paper doesn't come and call them bad names, or so that the local secular school will talk to them. If you get rid of those employees, you can lower tuition. And I think parents should know we have their back, and we have the back of their local pastor, as long as they're not crazy, right? But if you're a normal Christian, if you're a normal Orthodox priest and you send your kid here, or a Catholic priest or a Protestant minister, we've got your back. And we don't have some entire division of our college that is stabbing you in the back and doing it for money.
Yeah. Well, and both Hildegard College, I'm assuming, I actually don't know if Hildegard College is a Christian college. I'm just assuming because of the name, but
It is
sectarian, right?
Yeah, we have no religious affiliation at all, though of course we welcome students of all religions.
Yeah. So what has been the driving force for parents or students who are interested in Ralston?
Well, like Matthew, we're just gearing up for a first degree program now, but I would say that we likewise have an overwhelming number of inquiries, and I think what's really at work is best described with the meaning crisis, and with with a pretty sharp awareness in the young that, not every institution all the time, but the system of education generally does not have their back, that it is fraudulent, that it is not in their interests, it is not going to enable them to ask the fundamental questions, it is not going to probably, at least in the humanities, even give them any valuable skills. They may not learn to write or read with any seriousness or think with any kind of serious criticism, despite the constant refrain that it's all about critical thinking. They're going to come out as more or less robots for the currently conventional ideas. And so, smart young people are awake to this. I mean, they're not idiots. I mean, they if you want to learn and you have genuine curiosity for serious thought, you're going to be able to judge that this institution is not going to offer it to you. So what we have found is that by and large, for our potential students, they're people who really want to encounter ideas in a hardcore way. They want to think. They want to be challenged. They want a radical freedom to go where the argument leads, and to show themselves worthy of that kind of intellectual work and quest. At a larger level, with the large numbers of people that we have the privilege of speaking to in our podcast and through our live events and so on, we find that it's generally, I would characterize it as continuous with that. It's people who just trying to ask real questions, the kind of questions that human beings have evolved to think are fundamental to their own realization. What is the meaning of life, and so on and so forth? How do I deal with suffering? What is the nature of truth? What is beauty? How can I live with some sense of abiding meaning and substance and depth? And the truth is, people are finding themselves without the means to do that, and they're turning wonderfully, though this is, to those who are trying to offer something meaningful in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so tired of the lack of substance at branding at these universities, where they're going to make today's leaders. And I mean, apparently following is no longer a valuable skill by anybody, but we are all going to be mass leaders, and we have no idea why your math major or why your engineering major is going to prepare you to be a leader. But that's the major selling point, is that you can come here and become a leader, right?
The goal is you're going to read well, you're going to write well, you're going to think well, you're going to be numerate, you'll understand the scientific methods, and you're not going to misunderstand the cultural moment. And so if you can do that, that's a good undergraduate education. And if you can do that without debt, in a context that supports the values of the parents, the pastors, the other people that send their kids to college, hopefully, then that's a good thing. And then kids do what they want. They turn out as they will. I should say, St. Constantine, we don't have a statement of faith. Anybody can come. We'll accept any students. And so we accept students from all over Houston. We're serving the entire community. Most of our students aren't Orthodox. We have no idea what they're doing on a Sunday morning. We have no idea what their particular beliefs are, because when you're sitting with a student like I was last week in an intensive Republic seminar that lasted all weekend, and you're talking about the nature of what it is to be a man and a woman. I know this down the street at the University of Houston, this is a discussion, and people were giving opinions of all kinds, left, right, up, down, that would have gotten that class shut down at the University of Houston. So we have the opportunity for our students to say whatever they want, and then be guided by this great literature, by these great ideas that have formed not just leaders, but you're right, the followers and good citizens for this republic. I don't know how you can have a republic without informed voters. And the basis of a liberal arts education used to be not to get a job. Teddy Roosevelt didn't go to Harvard because otherwise he'd never have a job. You went to become a gentleman or a lady, ultimately. And so can we produce a civilized leadership of ladies and gentlemen who are fit to be voter leaders or voter followers in this republic? And I think the answer is yes. We don't have to reinvent anything. What if the Reynoldses, we came to the United States 400 years ago, and nobody even gave us high school, let alone college, in places like Western Virginia. And then when they finally let us go to college after World War II, they gave us giant state universities, which were kind of McColleges. Well, what if the Oxford and Cambridge one-on-one tutorial style were given to the Reynoldses and not just the Rockefellers and the Roosevelts? What if finally we were able to get leadership class and upper middle class education for people that are the rock, are the basis for the republic? And I think a lot of these micro colleges are going to be able to do that. And it's really exciting. There's hope. This is a hopeful thing.
That's great. Well, we have about 5 minutes left. I'm gonna pass it to Matthew on this, because I love getting to hear about what kind of students you're wanting to turn out, because you're right. We need citizens, we need followers, we need leaders, we need those who care about these good and true and beautiful things, right, to pass on to the next generation, as Stephen said. So Matthew, what's your hope that Hildegard is going to have? What kind of students come out from it?
We are purposely, well, I should say this, we started discussing Hildegard College as the possibility of founding a traditional classical college. And these are classical schools around the country that are doing great. My kids go to a classical K through 12 and are learning Latin and are better at it than I am now. And I really admire it. But we have a mission at Hildegard for all students, and we want to be not just accessible, but we want to capture students' imaginations wherever they are. I don't mean that in a trite way. It can sound cute. That's not what I mean. One of my favorite kind of luminary authors for thinking about education is Cardinal John Henry Newman, who says that, if I can get it right, philosophy, however enlightened, however profound, gives no command over the passions. So no matter how profound or enlightened philosophy is, it can't command the passions. And he ends this section by saying, a liberal education does not make a Christian. And you can substitute, if you want, a good citizen, a good voter, a virtuous person, a good father or mother or spouse or community member. A liberal education doesn't make a Christian or a virtuous person, because liberal education alone, by which I mean the study of logic and grammar and the technical things of learning, it can't move you. It can show you what wisdom is, but it can't move you to love wisdom or to desire it. And I think that's the place of love and passion in a truly transformative liberal arts curricular program that includes stories and includes the arts. This is something I originally learned when I was in college, learning under John Mark Reynolds in the Tory program. There are two, correct me if I'm wrong, John Mark, there are two kinds of Platonists. One that thinks Socrates hates poetry, and others that thinks that Socrates thinks that poetry is maybe the only thing that can get you out of the cave.
Hey, The Republic is a great work of poetry and art. So either Plato was so self-referentially incoherent, he didn't realize what he was doing, or yes, I agree with you.
That's the kind of student we want, a student who wants to make a difference in the world, but needs to figure out how, and needs to be formed into the kind of person that actually will make that decision. And so that's the kind of student that we want to graduate.
That's fantastic. I thank you guys so much for sharing your vision of your schools, for doing this good work, because I know it is a very thankless job that you are set out to do. And it's one of those things that you're probably not going to see the fruit of, and the fruit's going to be born after you're long gone. And yet I thank you for doing it, because it gives me hope. I'm not an apocalyptic thinker. I'm not cynical about the state of things, but there's not a lot of hope in the state of things in the academy, and you guys are the glimpses of it. So I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you for having us. We named ourselves St. Constantine because in this sign conquer. We're not going to hide in a cave, eating stored food, waiting for the Antichrist to drag us out. We'll be sitting in the center of cities, reading the Republic, and trusting that God will save us, full of goodness, truth, and making beauty wherever we can.
That's fantastic.
Thanks for having us, Jessica.
Yeah,
Keep
thank
up
you,
the good
Jessica,
work.
Stephen, John Mark. It was a pleasure talking.
It's always
Likewise.
fun.